Okay, so our next speaker is Jennifer Ventress. She is the nurse administrator for the Alabama State Department of Education, and she will be giving you an update. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Can y'all hear me okay? I tend to move around a little bit, so I'm not going to stand at that podium. I will say that I'm going to have to talk to Annette and Jennifer next year about getting on a different schedule, because to follow Dr. Dickey is kind of a hard, hard act to follow, especially when you're talking about school nursing. But I know y'all are excited to hear everything that we've got to share with y'all today about school nursing. We'll talk a little bit about COVID if you want to. I don't have that in the slides, but if you've got questions about COVID, I'm certainly happy to answer any of those. How to manage, how to control, how to mitigate, anything like that that y'all want to ask me while I'm here, I'm happy to answer those for you. I always like speaking to the 21st century because y'all are really the main after-school care program that our kids attend, and our nurses have got to be in contact with y'all. And it's so important that we understand everything that is encompassed in the school day, and certainly before school and after school activities is part of that. So we'll get started with a little video. This is about transportation, but I want you to think while you're watching this, what if this was happening in my after school care program? Would I be ready?
Tragic video just released of a 14-year-old who died after a medical episode on her school bus. The video is so difficult to watch, we have chosen not to show the girl in distress. News Channel 8's Melissa Marino joins us now live. This is a terribly tragic and sad story, Melissa.
Well, and Jen, as you mentioned, very tough and heartbreaking to watch. Minutes go by, and the driver and the aide on this bus have no idea what to do. A school bus ride turns to chaos.
Is she breathing? She's like gasping for air.
It happened moments after the girl was picked up from her home in Bartow. An attendant notices the 14-year-old girl with special needs starts having a seizure.
Should I lift her head up? Teresa, is she breathing?
Although we're choosing not to show the girl in distress, we can tell you the girl flails around and gasps for air.
Is she breathing? No. She's still. I don't think I should touch her, right?
The bus driver and attendant helplessly watch. According to the police report, EMS arrives 19 minutes after she started seizing. That's 19 minutes without life-saving CPR.
Okay, so that shows you how quick something can happen. And how we've got to be ready. Let's just go through just a couple of points of that video, okay? Number one, is it the bus driver and the aide's fault? No. They didn't know what to do, did they? They were standing there helpless. If you could hear the video good, you heard the aide say, "I don't touch her, do I?" Right? Whereas if they had just put her on the ground and turned her over on her side, she wouldn't be dead today.
Tragic video.
Secondly, you know, what impact does that have on that bus driver and that aide? They got to live with this forever. And it's all about nothing but training, y'all. And so it is so important that we get this training right and that we understand the health care needs of our students. Because it's one thing to have OCR come in and, you know, review all of our files, or, you know, federal programs has DOJ or somebody to come in and take money back or say you didn't do something right. But when you've got a dead child, that's a whole different ballgame, isn't it? So we must take these healthcare conditions seriously, and we've got to know what to do with these children that have these chronic health conditions. So I don't mean to start out on a negative note, but I do want to impress upon you the importance of making sure that you are talking to your lead nurse. And we're going to talk in just a few minutes about, what the law requires as far as a lead nurse and who that person is, but you've got one. And if you're in charge of a 21st century program and you are not regularly talking to her, then there is a gap there, a big gap, okay? So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about health legislation and how it relates to chronic illness. We're going to review what a school nurse is and who she is. We're going to talk about what is an invasive procedure, what can and cannot be done by a nurse. And then we're going to review the requirements of having a nurse. And we're going to discuss the future because we have a brand new seizure law that was passed last year that is going to require additional training because of things like this, as well as some delegation if your system provides for that. So what is the relationship between health and attendance in 21st century? So we know sick children do not learn. If you've got a child in your after-school care program that's a diabetic, and they eat a snack before they come to you, and instead of eating a healthy snack like cheese and crackers, they go and get a honey bun. So now their blood sugar is suddenly 400. Are they going to learn anything in your after-school care program? Nope, they're wiped out. They're foggy, they don't even know. They're probably acting out behaviorally because they're just not in the groove. That blood sugar's got to be between 100 and 150. Some maybe 200, but for the most part, 100 to 150 to really get that learning to occur. Okay? So that's why sometimes they get insulin at 2 o'clock because we know they're going to have a snack. So talk to your nurses about what those kids are doing. Secondly, we know truancy and absenteeism is a results or relates to chronic illness. If kids are out of school because they have a chronic illness, whether that is asthma or diabetes or seizures or any other chronic illness, then they are missing time at school. And we know that leads to dropout, and we know that if a child's not in a chair, they're not learning, right? Now, we had a little bit of a negotiation about that the last 2 years because of COVID. And, if you look at the statistics, I think we'll all going to see in a few years that virtual situation is not as good as in-person learning. It's just not. You cannot do that. So we have got to make sure these children are in a chair. Where did nursing in the schools come from? Well, in 1902, there was a sick child that was excluded from school, and they sent that child home, and later they saw that same child playing in the neighborhood with other kids and infected them. So this really smart lady from New York City said, we got to hire somebody to make sure that that child is taken care of in the school and sent home appropriately, and the parent understands to take them and keep them away from other children. So that's where school nursing started. The role of the school nurse is responsible for all students in that district, okay? Be it before school, after school, on the bus, in the PE room, in the gym, wherever they are, that school nurse is responsible. They're also responsible on any outside trips. If they go on a trip to Atlanta, the band takes a trip to Atlanta. If they go on extended school-sanctioned competitions or school-sanctioned excursions, then the school nurse is still responsible for the care of that child. Now, does that mean a nurse has got to be there every minute? Maybe, maybe not, depending on what those health care issues are and what that child needs. So that's why the communication has got to stay open. School-sponsored and direct participant. Direct participant means that child is participating in a school function. So, you know, I get asked all the time, what about the prom? Well, are they dancing? If they're at the prom and they're dancing, they're participating. So yes, the prom has to be covered. So if it's school-sponsored and school-sanctioned and that child is a direct participant. Now, if they're going to the football game and they're sitting up in the stands with all of their friends and they're just there as a fan, then they're not a direct participant. So we're not responsible for that. But certainly in your 21st century programs, we are responsible for that care. And we must make sure that we are using our nurses to fulfill that. And that is usually an on-campus situation. School nurses must be fully aware of the law as it pertains to delegating. So we're going to talk about delegation, but first let's talk about these laws. These are the same laws that apply to you, okay? You've got the ADA Act, you've got 504 that applies, you've got IDEA, which we all know services kids with special needs. You've got FERPA, Office of Civil Rights. That's really the big one for nurses, because, and for you as well, because you cannot discriminate against a child because of a health care condition. You can't say, I'm going to treat child A and let them go on the field trip, but child B, I don't have a nurse for you to go, so you're going to have to stay back and do an activity. You can't do that. That's discriminating against child B because they have a health care condition, and that is against OCR rules and regs. The Alabama Nurse Practice Act, while we function as school board employees, and certainly we are dictated to the same way everybody is by the superintendent who is the driver of the boat of that system, we are also under the authority of the Alabama Board of Nursing. We are licensed under them, we have to provide our CEUs under them, and they are very conservative, and everything that we do has to apply to all nurses across the state of Alabama. So generally, if you can't do it in a hospital, you can't do it in the schools, okay? Self-Administration Act, so that is now the Kyle Grady Act. Kyle Grady was a child on a school bus who was not allowed to carry her inhaler. She had a acute episode of asthma, didn't have the inhaler with them because she was not allowed to carry it, and the bus driver was not trained. She nearly died. She stayed on the ventilator for 3 weeks. Ultimately, she did okay. She lived, and so the law was named after her. But the Kyle Grady Act specifically says that if a nurse and a physician says it's appropriate for a child to carry an emergency drug and give it to themselves, they should be allowed to do that. But only the nurse can make that decision. You can't say, well, I'm going to let this child carry his inhaler. I think he can do it. The nurse has specific paperwork to fill out for that, and you've got to have an order from the doctor. But we should allow those children to self-carry their own medication. Immunization law, y'all know about it. We all have to have blue cards, what we used to call blue cards on kids, and that's an updated certificate of immunization. Will that include COVID vaccines in the future? Don't know. We'll see where that goes. McKinney veto, we deal with that a lot with enrolling children. I'm sure y'all do as well in 21st century. Safe at School Act and the new seizure law is one I want to bring to your attention. That is probably the one that affects you the most, because those you've got to have specific details in the individual health care plan to take care of those children. And if you're not receiving individual health care plans in your 21st century care program, then again, there's a gap, because you should be getting those care plans. You should be signing off on them to say you understand what to do in the event of an emergency, and you understand the care that this child is receiving. And some of you may even be a diabetic or an inhaler assistant, and you're able to administer those drugs yourself. I certainly hope some of you are. Anaphylaxis, again, is entwined with Kyle Grady, and that is your EpiPens and your emergency anaphylaxis medication that a lot of kids do give to themselves. Sunscreen law, sunscreen, big probably in 21st century in your after-school care. These kids can now self-carry and self-administer sunscreen with no physician order and no documentation. Okay? So if you've got an 8, 9-year-old that wants to bring sunscreen to the after-school care program, you must let them. They can self-carry and apply it. The only time we ask for any kind of permission is if the parent asks us to apply that, okay? But that is a big law that passed a couple of years ago, and it was really lobbied hard in Alabama. Alex Hoover Act is the palliative and end-of-life care. This could very well affect you in your 21st century care program. Alex Hoover was a child from the Birmingham area that was a dying child. He had a terminal illness, but he wanted to be with his peers. And he really felt strongly that he should be with his peers. He was autistic. His parents felt like he should be with his peers. And of course, back then, the school system did not allow that. So that child did die, thankfully, at home during the summer. But because of Alex Hoover, this law was passed. And this law says now in schools, we have to develop a plan if a child is terminally ill. And the parents want us to carry out that terminally ill plan at school. We have to have physician's orders. You've got to have a team. You've got to know where to take that child. You've got to know how to get that child off your campus, because that is the goal, not to let the child obviously die at school. We want children to be at home when they die, but we want them to have a quality of life at school. You would be surprised. In 2 years, we've had 3 cases, and they have all done excellent. The school systems have done excellent. The parents have done excellent. The children have done excellent. Unfortunately, we've lost 2 of the 3. We still have 1 in Alabama right now. So this is something else that could very well affect your program. And then lastly, and the most new law, is the Safe at School Seizure Act, which is to be implemented in the fall of 2022. So we talked a little bit about your system must have nurses. Every school has a nurse, okay? They may not have a nurse physically in that building, but every school has a nurse assigned to it, okay? Now, the law says that LEAs must employ school nurses, and the law says that the superintendent must designate 1 RN whose responsibility it is to be a lead nurse and to present them annually with a report of all the health care issues within that district. So your lead nurse is doing this, okay? She's doing this. But if she doesn't know what you got in your after-school care program, she's not adding that. Now, why do we want this? Because we have over 5,000 diabetics right now. We can't take care of all of them with the nursing that we have now. We've got to have more nurses. So that, number 1, that data is very important. But number 2, the main reason is because that superintendent needs to know what he's got in his schools. So if we need a nurse, he understands why. So again, this includes all programs, including 21st century. So your nurse, again, is RN or LPN licensed by the state of Alabama. They should be a professional. I preach to them regularly. Do not get in the education box. We are not educators, y'all. This Dr. Dickey was like, so over my head. I mean, nurses don't even talk in complete sentences. You know, we say patient stable, acute pain. You know, we use 2 words. And this guy is, so we do not need to be talking to you about the education world. And I hope and pray that most people, and most do, superintendents including, They let that nurse be the clinical voice in that LEA because she is that professional. And in many schools, she is the only clinical voice. So in your after-school care program, she has got to be your clinical voice to say, this student needs this, this student needs this, this student needs this. And yes, it's expensive. Nurses are not cheap. But you got to have them. We're past the point of whether or not it's a question. And when I talk to superintendents about when do you need a nurse, you know what I tell them? And this is the language they understand because, again, they're not clinical. I would call it an invasive procedure. But what does that mean? It means it's going in a hole somewhere in the body. If you got to stick something in a hole, you can't do it if you're a layperson. It's got to be a nurse to do that. That kind of language everybody understands. So, key roles for a nurse includes the clinician part. We're a patient advocate. We've got to speak for these children. We're a social services coordinator a lot of times. We're trying to get the child what they need. Thankfully, we've got more counselors and mental health coordinators now that help us with that. We're a health educator. We teach diabetics how to take care of themselves every day. We must move these diabetics forward because by 12th grade, when they get ready to graduate, there's not going to be a nurse with them in college. If we have not taught them how to take care of themselves, we have created a terrible situation. And that's on us. That is on nobody but us. Because there are millions of people that live with diabetics every day that take care of themselves and don't have a nurse with them all day, every day. Right? We're a liaison. And the primary role is to support student learning by acting as that advocate between the medical home, which is the doctor, the schools, and what affects that child's ability to learn. And we must be all of that. And generally, there's only one of us, as y'all know. Services that we provide, the main thing, and if you don't get anything out of my talk today other than this, please listen and hear me on this. The most important way to protect yourself with health care issues is to have a health care plan, okay? In the diabetic and seizure law, if you do not know what that health care plan says, you are completely at liability because we are required by law to act off of that health care plan only. Only, even despite what the physician's order says sometimes. Because the doctors lobbied for that. They said, we're going to give you the order, school and parents, and together y'all figure out how to implement the care. Okay? So you must have copies of your health care plan. You must have the same trainings that all other LEA employees get. For instance, are y'all getting universal precautions training? Are y'all getting anaphylaxis training? Are y'all getting the Kyle Grady Act training? Are y'all getting training on immunizations? Are you attending Institute Day and seeing all the videos related to health? Are you getting the diabetic care that you need, the training that you need? Are you getting the seizure training? Because again, I go back to this video, which was all about training. All about training. And guys, that's what keeps me up at night. I mean, the last thing we need is to have an incident in one of our schools where our lack of training created a problem for our child. And that's why I come and speak to y'all and transportation and special ed. I get on everybody's agenda that I can possibly get on so that you know what your liability is with these healthcare issues. Because they're not getting better. As technology grows, you see now continuous glucose monitoring devices on these kids. We don't even hardly do finger sticks anymore. We got heart pumps running around in Birmingham where the kid's got a backpack, he plugs himself into the wall, and he's literally waiting on a heart transplant. But he's a straight A student. He doesn't even have an IEP. And the blood is flowing out of his body into this backpack, getting reoxygenated and coming back to him. This child doesn't even have a pulse. You can't feel a pulse because the blood is just flowing. This is where technology has gotten us. 5 years ago, that would have never gotten out of an ICU. That child would have been stuck to an ICU bed, and they would have not gotten out until they got a heart. And now they're in school. So we have to be ready for this. What difference can a school nurse make? Well, we know that impacts health. We know we have to collaborate with the administrators to provide that good environment. We have to provide the parental assurance for the students' needs. And then this allows the teachers to teach. So if there's a school nurse in the school and we're providing that care, then the teacher doesn't have to worry about that child having a seizure. She knows that nurse is going to be there in 30 seconds with that medicine and get rid of that seizure. There's only 2 things that get rid of seizures. Only 2 things. Time, they'll eventually quit seizing, or medicine. That's the only way. You can't physically restrain them. You can't make them stop. There's nothing you can do except get that drug there or wait it out. 98% of the school nurses that have been surveyed across the country say they have saved at least one child's life in their career. 82% have identified abuse and neglect. 67 have canceled a depressed or suicidal student. That number's probably up now. I would say that number is higher. School nurses feel like they decrease absenteeism, particularly during the summer and on breaks, because we see admissions in children's hospitals and at USA, we see admissions go up when kids are out during the summer or when they're on a break, because they do not have that school nurse every day watching over them. We identify health problems, and obviously we decrease discipline referrals, because again, if you've got a child that's sneaking a honey bun every day, he's acting out. He is not with the program. So he's either bouncing all over the walls, cutting up, kidding, or he's angry and furious and anxious, and so it depends on how his high blood sugar affects him, but he's not himself. And so if you've got that going on in a classroom with 30 other kids, what does that create? Chaos. And so we've got to make sure so that that nurse can see that that monitor on that child has gone to 400, then she can go give him a dose of insulin, and she can slowly bring that blood sugar down, and we'll have our normal child back. So that's the key to these continuous glucose monitoring devices. That's the key to watching these students and making sure that we're communicating with them and teaching them not to go get a honey bun, because you're not going to feel good in an hour when you do that. Nurse survey, I don't know how my numbers got messed up there. 20,014, 145, I don't know. Who knows? I was still doing this late last night. 150 public schools systems. We've got over 1,500 actual schools. We show about 1,176 RNs and about 944 LPNs. We have over 300 nurses that ride a bus on a regular basis. 300 nurses that ride a bus like every day, okay? That's a lot of nurses out there. Now, some of those are school nurses that, ride the bus before school and after school. But some of them are just contracted nurses that come in for those 4 hours. Many more attend extracurricular activities on a regular basis: football, basketball, cheerleader, band, soccer, cross country, golf. One of the things that got Alabama in trouble with the diabetic law was we had a golf student that was a senior in high school, and he was about to go to Alabama on a golf scholarship. And we forced a nurse to ride in the golf cart with him in his last golf, tournament. And that was reported to OCR, and that's part of the reason that we got an OCR complaint on that, because we labeled that child as a sick child. And he didn't want to be labeled as a sick child. And so we got an OCR complaint, and it was substantiated, because we had said, you can't do this without a nurse. And certainly that was wrong. That was wrong. We should have allowed him to either self-administer, or we should have allowed him to have a coach or somebody trained in case he got in trouble. And that's what the diabetic law has done for us. Because, in 3 months he was going to be gone to Alabama and wouldn't have a nurse. Why were we doing that to him? And it was a hard thing to understand. Now, if you've got any delegation going on in your program right now, if you've got medication assistance, if you've got diabetic assistance, this is the picture, okay? So you see the nurses in the middle, unlicensed medication assistant, unlicensed diabetic assistant, delegation of EpiPens and naloxone. We'll talk about naloxone a little bit in a few minutes. And now in the fall of 2022, we'll have unlicensed seizure assistants. So now we have 3 kinds of assistants: medication, diabetic, and seizure, okay? You may be getting only glucagon trained, but you're still a diabetic assistant. You may be getting only inhaler trained, but you're still a medication assistant, okay? So that sort of fits in one of those categories. How many medication assistants and unlicensed people have we seen over the years? Well, if you look in 2014, we had about 9,123. In 2021, that was up to 10,416. Now, those include all assistants. But my point in bringing that out to you is because these people are working under some nurse's license. Some nurse has signed off saying they're competent, they know what to do, they know how to count that narcotic, they know when to give it, they know the right dose, they know the right time, they know the right student. So all of that falls under somebody's license and requires that intense training, okay? So again, it all goes back to training. I believe we'll delegate more because, as we've said, there is no way a nurse can be in every place that they need to be right now. We just, number one, if we could pay them, if we had the money to pay them, dreaming, if we had the money to pay them and we couldn't hire them because they're not out there. There's a huge nursing shortage right now. Hospitals can't even find nurses. So, and they pay premium. They pay sign-on bonuses, they pay shift differentials, they'll pay you just about anything to come to work right now. But it would take $30 million a year more just nursing to put a nurse in every school. And still we wouldn't cover the after school and the buses and all of that sort of stuff. So we've got to have medication assistants and seizure assistants and diabetic assistants. But we've got to do the training right. If you do have people delegated to, they are delegated to assist the nurse, and they've got to complete the training. Now, the initial training is down to 7 hours, which it really doesn't take 7 hours anymore. The certification takes about 15 minutes, the recertification. In the school, only a nurse, a dentist, or a doctor can delegate. That's the only 3 things. So I've heard stories of, well, and I'm just using y'all as an example. I really hadn't heard this one from the 21st century. my 21st century person wants Miss Jones, who's the secretary, to be the medication assistant. And everybody loves Miss Jones. Oh, she's just so good and sweet, and the parents bring her cookies and crackers and flowers, and she just greets everybody, so we're going to let her be the medication assistant. Well, does Miss Jones have a private space? Doesn't sound like it, does it? Does Miss Jones have time to concentrate on who she's giving that medicine to? Is it the right student? Is it the right time? Is it the right dose? Does Mrs. Jones have the competency to do it? She's so busy doing all these other things. And last but not least, can she secure the narcotics where she is? So a lot goes into thinking about who is going to be the medication assistant other than we like Miss Jones. And then I hear sometimes, well, the principal wants so-and-so and so-and-so, and she just, her elevator just doesn't go all the way to the top. Okay, well, then, why are you signing off on that delegation? I say that to nurses all the time. I'm like, this is you. Don't sign it. So if a nurse comes to you as a 21st century director and says, I don't think this is the right person, then, that's the final word. This is not the right person. Because, again, that falls under that nurse's license. An LPN can delegate, but only after the RN has reviewed that. And, again, we have over 10,000 UMAs in Alabama. The 4 must-haves if you're using medication assistance: you have to have the training, you have to have a yearly observation skills check sheet, you have to have the delegation to unlicensed people signed by the RN, and you have to have continuous and ongoing monitoring. So if y'all got nurses that work in your after-school care program, how many of you do have nurses that actually work in your program? Not enough. If you have nurses that work in your program, they can delegate. But if you don't, then your school nurses have to do it for you. And again, re-emphasizing this point on the health care plan. The individual health care plan is the Bible of how the care is provided. The legal definition is a document that outlines health care to be provided by the school, developed by the school nurse in conjunction with the parents or guardians, and may contain the orders from a physician, a PA or a nurse practitioner. Okay? So it is the document that outlines the care in the school setting. Okay? And it must be detailed. If their child's in 21st century after school, there ought to be a section in there about after school, how that care is going to be provided. Again, creeping up on 5,000 or more diabetes now. We won't belabor this point. I don't know how much time I got left. Am I doing okay? Okay. Over 5,000 diabetes, over 3,000 get regular glucose monitoring. CGMs, again, are the latest technology. That's the device you see on these kids' arms. They take their phone and swipe it, and they can get an immediate blood sugar reading. And the nurse has a device in her office that she is constantly monitoring that device so that if it goes up or if it trends down, she gets a beep. She gets a warning, as well does the parent, okay? There is a new drug called nasal glucagon or Bicemic. Y'all may have heard of this. It is taking the place of the old-fashioned glucagon where you had to draw it up and give it in a syringe. This is a nasal spray, and it's very easy to train on. You can do glucagon-only training, and that child can self-administer, or somebody else can take care of that child until the school day's over, and then when they go to after school, you can use this emergency training as coverage for your glucagon. So I think that's going to really help us a lot. 25% have insulin pumps, and 17% are type 2 diabetes. 17 minutes. Thank you. Can't see that far. Allergy medicines. We have over 27,000 allergy medicines in our schools right now. 27,000. That's a lot. We administered 38 EpiPens last year. Treatment conditions. We got our nurse surveys really got skewed this last 2 years because of COVID, but I'll just speak to this just a minute. In 2008, we had 1 student on the ventilator in Alabama. Today, we have 168. In school with ventilators. Gastric tubes, we have had 341 in 2008. We're up to 422. And y'all know the condition 101, where a nurse is obligated to be with that student one-on-one all the time. That question wasn't even asked in 2008, and now we have over 400 that require a nurse one-on-one throughout the state. So you know the 168 ventilators do. That's a given. If they got a ventilator or a trach, they get a one-on-one. And they should, because you got to suction and you got to do all that stuff. So you see how the kids are getting in school that are sicker and sicker. So our health care conditions are certainly going up. Medication to administer and treat ADHD is astronomical. Inhalation therapy, 21,000. And last year we had 860 diastats, and we gave 183. So let's talk a little bit about diabetes, and then we'll talk about seizure. I'm going to have to rush through this a little bit, so I want to leave time for questions. But the diabetic law was lobbied by these people very hard, okay? And I will say parents for the most part, because again, going back to our golf student, they did not want their child labeled as sick children. Most people with diabetes, they think that's normal. Or they don't think that's normal, I shouldn't say that. They want to be treated normal. That's a chronic condition that they're going to live with forever, and it's not limiting. So they don't want a label placed on them. Your superintendents really stood up on this law, as did nursing and education. So experts agree that a school nurse should coordinate the training, but the training should be done. The school personnel do not have to be healthcare providers, and the purpose of the training is to equip the school with someone to help the nurse. So the Act came into effect in 2014, and here's a quick snapshot of what it says. A student with diabetes has the right to attend school for which the student is zoned, and the diabetic care shall, doesn't say may, shall be provided at school. A student with diabetes may participate in extracurricular activities to the same as a student without diabetes. So again, we go back to, I've got diabetes, I don't, and they've got to be treated the same way. Okay? So if you let a regular student in your 21st century, you better let a diabetic in. Okay? Even if you have to pay for a nurse to come take care of them, then you have to call Molly, get your grant raised, or get that health care. There's dollars out there that you can get more money for health care. But not having a nurse in 21st century, if you need a nurse, is not acceptable. Everybody clear on that? I don't want to misstate that, because it's very important that we all understand that. The Act allocates a properly trained, and the key word properly trained, person to give diabetic medications. And number 3 is the most important, and it goes back to the health care plan and how important your health care plan is. The Act allocates responsibility for the diabetic care in the school setting between the local school, the school nurse, the trained diabetic assistant, if there is one, and the parent or guardian. Okay? So what's left out of that equation? Anybody know? The doctor. The doctor. There's no doctor in there, is it? Why? Because the doctor said, I'm giving you the orders. You and the parent figure out how to make it work. Okay? So this is why the health care plan is so important, because if the nurse writes in the health care plan that the child's going to 21st century after school care for 3 hours every day after school, and the diabetic care is going to be performed by the aide in 21st century, and it's glucagon training only for an emergency, and they have a quick acting glucose, and they have a snack, and everything's good, and the parent's happy with that, then you don't have to give any emergency medicine. And everybody signs that, and everybody's good. But if the parent says, no, I want a nurse, then the parent gets a nurse, okay? Because you have got to have the parent and the school agreeing on how the care plan is going to read. And in this law, as well as in the seizure law, the parent has a lot of authority. Okay? Have a lot of authority. So we've got to make sure that even though we got, and this is the only law, and now the seizure law will be the only second law, in which a nurse does not 100% carry out the orders of a physician. But the physicians wanted it this way because they felt like that the school could better implement how that care was going to be provided. And we had Children's Hospital at the table, and we had USA from Mobile at the table. We had everybody at the table on this so that everybody understood that the parent would have, for the most part, the final say. The local Board of Education shall ensure that each student in the system with diabetes condition receives an appropriate health care plan. The school nurse or trained unlicensed person, get this now, to the extent required by the IHP, shall be on site and available. On site and available. So if the parent says, I want my child to have a nurse going to the football game on the bus, then that's got to be on the bus, and there's got to be a nurse on the bus. She can't be in the car behind them. She can't be 2 cars in the back. She can't ride with her friends, because this law says on site. Okay? A school system may not restrict a diabetic student from attending school on any basis that the student has diabetes, that the school does not have a nurse, or that the school does not have trained diabetic assistants. A student may participate in extracurricular, co-curricular activities to the same extent as other students. In addition, the school shall not require or pressure parents or guardians to provide the care. Okay? I'm going to flip on through this. We talked about the physician. This is where they lobbied for this. A physician has no supervisory authority over the school's execution and therefore shall be immune from civil liability if we act on something or we don't act on something, or what. The doctor's not responsible. Again, we've been over that one. All right, let's talk about epilepsy real quick. This bill is House Bill 76 if you want to Google it. I encourage you to go out there and read it. Again, it's very similar to the diabetic law. It was lobbied by pretty much the same group of people. Commencing with the 22-23 school year, the parent or guardian of a student who has a seizure and is enrolled in public K-12 schools may seek care by providing a health care management plan to be included in the student's IHP. So the health care management plan is a plan that USA and Children's has of how we take care of seizures. So that's basically our orders, okay? So again, the plan will come from the doctor, it'll include the orders, and then we develop the health care plan. The seizure management plan shall be submitted and reviewed by the lead nurse. Now, we're going to probably have to change that to her designee because some of these larger systems, the lead nurse can't review every one of them. Number 2, a list of prescribed medicines that the students may receive, including the name and the purpose of the medication, the prescribed dose, the route of administration, the frequency of the medication, and the circumstances under which it should be administered. So if you're in 21st century and the circumstances say the seizure medicine's got to be administered within 5 minutes of a seizure, you got to have somebody there that's going to administer that medicine within 5 minutes of a seizure. Okay? So very specific. So we will have to get very specific on this training as well as how we will do this. And we're in the process of a task force right now that will help us write this. Really quick, because I'm down to 5 minutes. I've got 2 more slides. Naloxone. Naloxone is the opioid reversal agent for an overdose. It's also called Narcan. Y'all heard of this? It's a nasal spray or an auto-injector. Hopefully you've already got it in your high schools. But if you have a middle school kids coming to your after-school care program, I encourage you to go to Jefferson County Health Department. I don't know why there's a big old space there. It is free, and your school nurse will have the information on how to get it. But I would encourage you to put naloxone in those 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade after-school care programs. Y'all, what we're seeing in the way of drugs is just unbelievable. We've had 3 students, strangely, all 3 of them were girls, and strangely, all 3 of them were in bathroom stalls. And they fell out for no reason. And the nurses took the naloxone in there and gave it, and immediately they were. So this stuff works. It's free. There's a training out there for you to train your staff to give it. It's nothing other than just pushing a pin and mashing a button or squirting something up their nose, but it will save lives. Okay. Now, I did not bore y'all with my grandchildren, but I did bore you with my dog. Questions? Okay.
So I heard you say that if something has to be inserted somewhere, you have to have, are you saying a nurse or a medically trained layperson, either or?
Not if it's got to be inserted somewhere. If it's a tube going down the nose.
Tubes or a suppository or something like that, but it's okay to do inhalers?
Yes. Yes, because you're only going to the mucosa. You're not going down the nose. But if you go in the nose, the rectum, or the vagina, that's the 3 places you got to go, that's when you need a nurse.
So the nose spray or the other one that you're talking about, that's not?
No, because it's not going down the hole, it's only going into the mucosa. Just like, trachs, that's in a hole. Just like tubes, that's in a hole. So that takes a nurse. Somebody?
Okay, if a student is diabetic and they're considered independent, but they have one of those fixed pumps, do they still have to be monitored by the nurse, even though children's hospital says they're independent?
Yes. Yes, the Board of Nursing has said it is the school's responsibility, just like it is to provide the care, to monitor those CGMs, because if we leave it up to the parent or somebody else, they might break a leg or be at work or can't get to their phone, and then we're there with a child that we should have known was tanking and we did not know it. So we have had to buy iPads and devices. A lot of people have used their ESSER money for that to monitor those CGMs. Somebody else over here?
What do you do when you have the after-school program and you have advertised for a nurse for months and you cannot secure a nurse because they're making more money in the private sector?
Well, everybody's struggling with that. We're looking at doing our salary grid needs to be redone, and we're hoping the legislators will do that. that because that is under a legislative process. Did I just drop my mic? That is under a legislative process for us. However, in the meantime, you've got lead nurses and you've got staff nurses in your system. Now, nurses don't like for me to say this, but it's the truth. We got to all pull together in times of need. So some of those school nurses may have to work after school care. Hey, okay. Just like anything else, we signed up to be nurses. And when we need to cover something, we need to get it covered. Now, it's got to be short term, you got to be aggressively looking, you got to look at your pay structure, and you got to be competitive. But in the meantime, you cannot have students over there that need a nurse without a nurse. Because then you're breaking the law. And that lead nurse is responsible, by the way. Okay? When a system breaks a nursing law, that nurse is responsible. Okay? She is the leader of that clinical care. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Okay, so this is a very good question. So what the doctor has done is he said, I want the diastat in after school, but I don't want it on the school bus. So I'm assuming this child's got a very short ride home and that, the parent's going to be there to meet him. Oh, okay, so he rides the bus to school. Okay. Okay, so again, he must have a very short bus ride. So, well, some even go up to 15 or 20 on that. Yeah. But some go up to 15 or 20 minutes on a bus ride if they've got a short ride. So a doctor will give us an order that says do not carry the diastat on the school bus, but have it at school and have it in aftercare. So that's what we got to go by with that because that's what's in the health care plan. Did you say the school was paying the parent to pick her up?
No, the school was paying for the after-school nurse, but wouldn't let her ride the bus home with the child, so we had to ask the parent.
Well, was the parent in agreement with that?
She was okay.
Okay. Well, yes, you can always ask a parent to do something. You can say, will you be at the football games or can you be at the football games? But we cannot pressure them. Okay? If the parent demands a nurse on the bus and the diastat, the child rides the bus, yes. Because again, it goes back to what's written in that health care plan. In her case, I'm assuming, I'm hoping, it's written in the health care plan that the parent has agreed to pick the child up from aftercare. And so therefore, the parent becomes responsible when the child gets off property. Okay, I'm being told I got to get off. I'll come back next year. If y'all have any questions, write me or email me or call me.
Okay, if we can give Nurse Ventress a hand and thank her. That is a lot of information to be responsible for, and so we are so appreciative. Thank you so much. Okay, so now it is about time for lunch, but before we run off to lunch, of course, we want to thank our sponsors. Just a little information, lunch is being provided, which if you have been part of 21st Century for any period of time, you know that that is very unusual for us to be able to provide food at our program. So thankfully, our sponsors have donated these items, and so we definitely want to give them their due. The first sponsor we want to bring up right now is STEM Scope, Christine Davis, and after that, we're going to bring up Ibu Job from SCORE. I'm sorry.
This one? Okay. Hi, y'all. I'm Christine Davis. Like she said, I'm with STEM Scopes, and we are basically here to support any STEM needs your programs may have. So we've got a digital curriculum that's kind of our pride and joy. It's grab-and-go kits and hands-on experiences that go along with this digital curriculum. So that's one thing we've got for you, making it easy for teachers to implement, facilitate. Even if you've got volunteers, they can just grab it, go, let's go with the STEM lesson. We've also got STEM certifications for you guys. So you've probably heard of the Alabama Teams Act. I cover those, the National Institute of STEM Education, and those certifications as well. 3, we've got PD, any STEM PD standalone. I've got a catalog if you'd like to take a look. We've got streaming, coding, everything STEM. So come see me at the back table and enjoy your lunch.
Okay, and next we have Ibu Job with Rhythm.
All right, I'm incredibly nervous right now. I don't know the last time I spoke in front of a group of people like this, just like you guys probably don't remember the last time you were in a group like this. So I'm gonna read off my phone, and don't judge me for it, please. So again, Ibu Job with Rhythm. We are a mental health and well-being assessment tool for K-12 students and staff. Currently, we're actually fortunate to serve over 60 county schools in Alabama. I only have 2 minutes, so I'm not going to talk too much about us because I'm at a table to talk about us. I do want to take the time to acknowledge what you guys all do. You provide necessary enrichment opportunities and services that don't normally exist within the classroom at any given time. See, I'm shaking. I'm so nervous, guys. I'm sorry. And you have even less time to you have even less time to connect and engage with the kids than you normally would like in a traditional school day. So where we come into play is we want to help you guys get kids in the right state of mind, regulated to learn, engage, and be the best possible students and youth for you guys in your programs. And I'm rambling, so I'm gonna stop, but if you get me behind a table where I have a bit of a guard, I'll feel more confident to talk to you guys one-on-one. So please come and see us in the back, and we really appreciate you guys having us out here. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to dismiss. Lunch is being served in the vestibule. You'll see drinks behind you. Please be in your seats at 1:10 so that we are ready to start at 1:15. Thank you so much.